Visual opening for readers or viewers. The year was 1960. Beneath a frozen desert of endless white, a massive steel door groaned open inside a tunnel carved deep into Greenland's ice sheet. Inside, men in heavy parkas walked through flickering corridors of blue ice. Pipes hissed with steam. Machines rumbled like thunder. And on a wooden sign, nailed into a frozen wall, were painted two chilling words: Camp Century. To the outside world, it was a harmless Arctic research station. In reality, it was the entrance to a top-secret American military project that planned something almost unthinkable: to build a city under the ice to hide nuclear missiles aimed directly at the Soviet Union. A world on edge. The 1950s were the years when the planet itself seemed ready to explode. America and the Soviet Union were locked in the Cold War, a global chess match of fear, technology, and ideology. The nuclear age had dawned. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were only a decade behind. The race was no longer for land, but for survival. Whoever could hide their weapons, launch faster, and strike farther would decide the fate of civilization. In Washington, D.C., men in dark suits gathered in smoke-filled rooms. Maps of the Arctic were pinned across the walls. Greenland, an icy, barren land halfway between America and Europe, glowed red on their maps like a secret key. General Thomas Power, head of the Strategic Air Command, leaned over a briefing table in 1958. He said, "This," he tapped a gloved finger over northern Greenland, "is where we build our advantage." The plan was audacious. Under the endless ice, where satellites couldn't see and no enemy could invade, America would construct a hidden missile base, capable of launching nuclear strikes across the Soviet Union in minutes. Its code name, Project Iceworm. And to cover it up, the Pentagon invented a front project, a fake scientific research station called Camp Century. Building a city beneath the snow. It began with a convoy of tractors and bulldozers, Operation Ice Cap, in 1959. More than 150 men braved temperatures that could drop to -70 degrees Fahrenheit, hauling in prefabricated tunnels, generators, and tons of supplies. They set up camp on Greenland's northwestern ice sheet, more than 800 miles from the Arctic Circle. Nothing lived there. No trees, no towns, only wind and white silence. The construction crew drilled deep into the ice and carved trenches nearly 20 feet high and 1,000 feet long, then covered them with steel arches and snow. Inside those frozen tunnels, a strange new world began to take shape. By 1960, Camp Century was a functioning underground city. 21 tunnels totaling over 3 kilometers, barracks, a mess hall, hospital, and even a movie theater. A chapel where priests said mass surrounded by blue walls of ice. And most astonishingly, a nuclear power plant flown in piece by piece called the PM-2A reactor, the first of its kind ever deployed in the Arctic. Every room vibrated faintly from the hum of the nuclear generator buried beneath the snow. To visitors, it looked like a triumph of science, a symbol of American innovation and courage. But behind the cheerful public tours and smiling soldiers, something far darker was buried. Project Iceworm, the real mission. Declassified U.S. Army documents would reveal decades later that Camp Century's real purpose was not scientific exploration. It was cover for Project Iceworm, a plan to install 600 nuclear missiles under the ice sheet, stretching across 135,000 square miles of tunnels and silos. Each missile, Iceman, as engineers nicknamed them, could be launched through vertical shafts cut into the ice, targeting every major Soviet city in under 10 minutes. The concept was chillingly brilliant. Greenland's ice was constantly moving, shifting a few feet each year. That meant enemy reconnaissance could never know where the silos truly were. A moving fortress under frozen camouflage. Documents from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers outlined a future where 3,500 miles of tunnels would house men, machines, and missiles, all silently waiting beneath the snow. But the plan had one critical flaw. The ice itself, beautiful, massive, and deadly, was alive. Life in the frozen city. For the soldiers and scientists stationed there, Camp Century felt like living on another planet. Outside, blizzards howled like ghosts. Temperatures plunged so low that spit froze before hitting the ground. Inside, the atmosphere was surreal. Tunnels glowed with fluorescent lights. Every wall creaked and moaned as the ice shifted. The air smelled of diesel, steel, and melted snow. Letters from soldiers to their families spoke of constant claustrophobia and insomnia. One engineer wrote, "You wake up every night thinking the ceiling will crush you. The ice never stops moving. It groans like it's alive." Yet they made it homey. They celebrated Christmas underground, played baseball in snow tunnels, even broadcasted radio messages to the U.S. They nicknamed it the City Under Ice. But scientists studying the tunnels noticed disturbing signs. The ceiling sagged. Walls began to close in. Every few days, teams had to carve them wider again. The ice was swallowing the camp, inch by inch. And then, in 1963, the first tunnel collapsed. Secrets and Science. Publicly, the U.S. Army released cheerful films about Camp Century. In one, a narrator's bright voice said, "Here, brave men of science study the mysteries of the Arctic for the good of mankind." But behind the propaganda, the Pentagon's Iceworm report grew more alarming. Tests showed that Greenland's ice sheet was not stable enough to support long-term missile bases. Temperatures fluctuated. The ice deformed unpredictably. Tunnels twisted under their own weight. Meanwhile, Danish officials, the legal owners of Greenland, had been told that Camp Century was purely scientific. If they ever discovered the truth, that nuclear weapons were being planned under their soil, it could create a diplomatic disaster. In secret, American diplomats wrote, "Project Iceworm must remain classified. Danish awareness would be politically unacceptable." By 1965, after millions of dollars and years of deception, the U.S. quietly shut down the nuclear reactor and began withdrawing men and machinery. They left the camp and its secrets sealed beneath the Arctic snow. No one expected that the ice would one day give it back. What they left behind. When the last crew departed in 1967, Camp Century was abandoned like a frozen ghost town. The tunnels were left intact, along with chemical waste, fuel, and radioactive coolant from the reactor. The U.S. Army believed everything would remain frozen for eternity. They calculated the ice sheet would never melt enough to reveal the base. But climate change had other plans. In 2016, Danish and American researchers returned to the site and made a horrifying discovery. Camp Century's ice cover was melting faster than anyone predicted.
Satellite data revealed parts of the buried tunnels collapsing and toxic materials seeping into the meltwater below. Underneath, trapped in time, still lay the remains of the PM2A nuclear plant, hundreds of thousands of gallons of diesel fuel and biological waste, all beginning to move toward the ocean.
The ice that remembers. When scientists drilled ice cores near the site, they found something unexpected: ancient sediment containing traces of plant life, frozen for over 100,000 years. That meant the Greenland ice sheet had melted completely in the distant past, proof that if it happened once, it could happen again. Suddenly, the buried vaults of Project Iceworm weren't just a Cold War relic. They were a ticking environmental time bomb, a literal nuclear ghost beneath the melting ice. As one Arctic geologist told The Guardian in 2017, the ice is not a vault, it's a temporary freezer, and the past is thawing. Secrets that won't stay buried. Today, more than half a century later, Camp Century's ruins still lie somewhere beneath Greenland's northern ice sheet, invisible from above, but alive in American military history. Declassified documents continue to emerge, showing how Project Iceworm symbolized the Cold War's paranoia and brilliance, and its blindness. It was a story of innovation born from fear, of scientists who built a city no one was meant to see, and of a government willing to bury its secrets under a mile of ice. The U.S. and Denmark still quietly debate what to do if the buried waste resurfaces. No nation wants to claim responsibility for the radioactive ghost sleeping beneath the Arctic snow.